Hi everyone, my name is Katy and I'm going to talk today about my experience as a remote product manager and share some of the lessons that I've learned from working in the virtual office. I feel very lucky to talk to you about this today because this topic feels really relevant, especially with the unprecedented circumstances that a lot of us are working in right now. So I'm happy to share some of my experience and hope that through these lessons, you can also take away something for your career. So a little bit about me, my name is Katy Mccreery and I'm currently a product manager at Box. Today, what we will be talking about is I will share about my experience and a bit about my journey to being a product manager. I'll also share what I think remote product management looks like. Then I will go into some of the experiences that I've had as problems and challenges and how I've navigated those and some of my lessons learned. At the end, I'll sum it up in 3 key takeaways. So a little bit about me. I have a degree in international security and conflict resolution, and I have a pretty varied experience working in nonprofits, agencies, startups, and now, as I said, I work on the developer platform team managing developer products at Box. So looking at that last slide, I really don't have the most linear path into product management. For me, I have tried to focus my career on helping people and doing that through mission-driven organizations. So when I look back and I see that through line, it has always been about helping others, thinking about the ways that we solve problems, thinking about how we do that with technology and innovation. So in the journey, there never seems to be a straightforward path. Looking back, there is kind of that through line. And I did that by following my curiosity. I started in marketing, I moved to a sales engineering role, and then ultimately I found my way to product where I feel really happy. I don't have much of a technical background, as you can tell. So for me, I'm pretty self-taught in anything technology related, from SQL to some Ruby on Rails. I also have taught myself design facilitation techniques, either through online classes or lots of reading, and then how to conduct experiments as a product manager. So today, my current role is exciting for me because it lets me make things for makers. I get to help developers and I get to think about what it is that they need to build solutions for their end users. So I like to think of it as that we are the team that helps make the experience of using Box APIs delightful. And that's been a really fun challenge for me. So now to pivot and share more on the topic specifically, what does product management done remotely look like? Ultimately, it's really, you're a product manager. It's the same exact job, but the work context itself makes it so different and it makes it have its own unique challenges. So I want to talk first about my own remote work timeline and my experience as a product manager remotely. So I started out not necessarily in product management, but working for a design agency that had a fully remote staff. So all of us, I think there was about 6 of us, we worked across the US, not in the same office. Then I worked in the headquarters for NationBuilder, a startup, for a long time, and that was headquartered in LA. But at a certain point, we had started to hire so many remote employees, particularly engineers on my team, that it didn't necessarily make sense to come into an office anymore. And I had a really cool opportunity to live in Hawaii, so it's pretty hard to turn down. So I took that, but kept my job as a remote product manager. And then most recently, I think a lot of us are experiencing today what it is to work remotely because of the global pandemic. So at Box, we have employees all over the globe, but my team was in our headquarters and we were in person every day. But the pandemic has really forced us to figure out what it is to do virtual work and be a distributed team. So my takeaway from a lot of this, particularly on the last slide, is that remote work really is not one thing. There's not one thing that I'm sharing or talking about when I'm saying remote work. It's more of like a general label or a theme. So there are a few factors that I think will really make up your experience and distinguish different experiences of working remotely from each other. So for me, these factors are laid out as follows. I think that remote versus distributed is a really interesting distinction. So what I would define this as is remote is where you have some employees that are working remotely. You're in an office, but maybe you have one team member that's remote, or you're that remote team member, versus the whole company working without a physical office space. Some companies, such as Envision, Automatic, there are companies that have no real office space where everyone goes every day and they work in a completely distributed fashion. So I think that there is a distinction there that will change your experience. Similarly, my big difference has been in team size. So when you're a team of 6 versus a team of 150 versus a team of 2,000, the way you experience remote work, who you're talking to every day, is somewhat different. I also think, particularly when I lived in Hawaii and was behind in time zone, the way that you are situated globally and the time zone that you're in will affect, how you collaborate with your team or what your experience of work is like. Lastly, my industry is software, so I'm speaking from that perspective. I really am not quite versed or sure what it is to work in other industries that are going through a remote work experience now. And then the culture of your organization, how sophisticated you are at doing remote work, how invested your team is in the tools or some of the things that help support it. I think that also changes the dynamic or how it is to be a remote worker. One other thing that I really wanted to highlight is that oftentimes, I think about talking about this with my parents almost, and it seems to them that this is just a trend or a fad. And I really don't think this is a trend or a fad. I think that working remotely is something that is much more ingrained in the way that work life happens now. So one stat that really stood out to me on this slide was that 44% of employees say that part of their team is full-time remote. And this has been true for me in every job. I have had at least one team member, or I've been that team member that is full-time remote. So it's starting to be more ubiquitous in the work landscape today. And then I think, as all of us know, the pandemic is really changing the way that people consider their workplace. So I have been forced to be fully remote. I know that many others have. There's also a lot of things that I've been reading and seeing lately about work from home, not necessarily being a temporary thing, but some companies such as Twitter recently announcing that companies can, or their employees can continue to work from home even after the pandemic. So I think that we're seeing a real shift, and it's happening at like a lightning speed. So to me, this topic feels more relevant than ever. What I wanted to call out, and I kind of want to bring back the thing I was talking about, in that, yes, this is the same job. You are a product manager, but working from a different location than your team, a different physical space, has its own really unique challenges. So I want to talk about those specific challenges. And then I want to share with you how I observed those problems come up and applied what I consider to be product thinking to overcome those challenges. And then all I can really hope for is that you can take away some lessons or things that stand out to you that you can apply to your own career. Okay, so to share about those problems and some of the lessons learned, I'm going to talk about a problem, maybe talk about why I think it's important, and then share the lesson or takeaway. So, problem number one. The first thing that I really started to notice when I, especially as a product manager, transitioned from working in a physical office space to working remotely is that the collaboration was just not the same. It just was a completely different experience for me. What I had experienced in person was a lot of, you're talking with a designer, you're talking with an engineer, and you want to explain something, you're not clear on something, so it's, let's grab a whiteboard. Or you want to map out a user journey, let's stick Post-its up on the board. It was very much an organic process of being in person and communicating ideas back and forth. The other thing that we would do that I miss dearly and was really fun is just, okay, we clearly need to talk about something. Let's go grab a coffee. Like, let's grab a coffee and talk it out. It felt easy to see if there was any misalignment, see opportunities to bounce ideas off of each other, and just do that. Now, what I'm experiencing, it's different. And what I have experienced in the past looks a little bit more like, oh, I sent you that. Was that an email or Slack? Okay, I want to share something. Okay, let me figure out how to share my screen. Oh, wait, I think you're frozen. It's just a whole different, dialogue even around collaboration that happens. So I want to share a bit about why I think this is such an important problem. And I really love these two diagrams because to me, I think product development is just a team sport. And I do my best work in a deeply collaborative process. So when I look at these two diagrams, they almost look kind of crazy and chaotic. But to me, they describe so much of the product development process of finding opportunities or problems, coming up with ideas, killing off ideas because they're bad, investing in ideas because you think they're good, turning that into software, finding the features to build. And I love just all of the different points on here that illustrate what collaboration needs to happen, whether you're diverging or converging on a problem or solution, whether you're taking something from the discovery process to the development process. There's so many different people involved and there's so much happening that it's really important that you're in communication with each other and you're constantly collaborating to come up with your best ideas. So for me, in identifying collaboration not feeling the same and what I was going to do about it, I think I had to better understand the why of my collaboration needs so that I could know what I wanted to do about it. So I did maybe like a nerdy product management thing, and I tried to write a user statement or a problem statement about it. And for me, it helped me identify what I want out of the different types of collaboration that I was feeling. So on the one hand, the two examples that I have up here show I really needed to have a generative ad hoc input from a number of different stakeholders when I am needing to come up with an idea or get strategic alignment around a problem or initiative. It's so much more generative and it's so much more of like a whiteboarding experience or a let's throw up ideas and see what sticks experience. The second part is a lot more tactical, and it's when the project's in motion, I really want to get ideas and issues surfaced quickly and regularly so that nothing gets blocked. So those were two collaboration needs for me. And the next step was for me to figure out what tactics I thought I could implement that were going to help me solve these problems. So I think the lesson for me was that I had to redefine how my team collaborates. And this started with, as a team, just determining the guidelines for asynchronous versus synchronous communication. When is it better to write something down and leave it for someone to read versus, okay, we need to have a meeting and a conversation about this. And this is a problem that comes up in person too. I just felt it much more acutely working remotely. So I think the big takeaway and maybe like a thing that I can impart or a tactic is when I would get in a Slack thread with someone and it would go back and forth a bunch, it just felt like, hey, why are we slacking about this? Let's pause. We should just hop on a Zoom call really quickly. So I felt like that kind of became a little bit of a unsaid policy of the team of if we are slacking a bunch of times back and forth or whatever chat messenger you use, let's just get on a call and talk about it, because in person, we would just talk about it. The other thing that I personally do, and I want to highlight this 100 times, is to write everything down, whether that's in your spec or in a decision log or a Jira ticket, whatever it is, whatever is the thing you're trying to track or better understand, make sure you're leaving artifacts or evidence for someone to be able to read it. Because a lot of the time, you're not going to have the benefit of proximity where people can overhear things. So writing everything down and making sure that it's documented somewhere. The last two things I think are a little, again, more tactical. instead of this ad hoc, in-person collaboration where if you're unclear on something, maybe you could just talk about it, I find that I was really needing to schedule collaboration time and then put a little bit of an extra effort on myself to come prepared to facilitate that time. Didn't have to be big, but just having a small agenda of what I wanted to talk about and make sure that I'm scheduling the time for the people to be there so that we can all talk about something together. It's just an exercise of getting on the same page and making sure that you're allowing good ideas to be surfaced. The last thing I want to say about this is that I was thinking about recommending tools here, but it's really not a specific tool, but tools are meant to help you. So for me, I've relied on tools like Mural to do whiteboarding or Jira to do project planning. Those are some of the tools that I think help, but it's not necessarily about any one specific tool. Last thing I'll say here is that I think it's really important to have a presence with your team on a regular basis. So even though sometimes I feel so busy or there's another important meeting, I try really hard to not skip things like stand-ups or regular team check-ins, because that is your FaceTime with your team that you're just not getting otherwise. So even if a project's in motion and I really don't feel like I have much to contribute or ask, I'll try to show up, ask questions to make sure that I'm keeping myself in the loop. And then I've also found that we've held a little 15-minute period after stand-up sometimes, again, a little scheduled time, to make sure that we're able to address or iron out any issues that come up in the stand-up. So holding a little bit of time afterwards to make sure that I'm available to answer those questions. Okay, I'm going to talk about the second problem. Second problem that I have found is that when I transitioned to working remotely, it was just a lot harder to feel that connection as a team. And I love the picture of the high five, because to me, when you found out that like something is working or you feel like you are on the same page, that high five is just very gratifying. And that's not something that you can replicate, really. So thinking about what it was to connect as a team virtually was a real challenge. And again, why I think this is so important. This is so cheesy, but I think it's true. And teamwork really does make the dream work. As product managers, we are so dependent on work from other people, whether that's marketing, engineering, sales, design. I think that building those relationships is so essential. Having a trust between your team, showing up for your team as a team player, those things are very core to the role. And I didn't want to necessarily treat those as less important now that I wasn't in person with people. Because so much of what is about trust building or just building relationships does happen in each other's presence, and it happens organically in the office. So I really had to think about what was going to help solve this problem for me now that I was remote. And the thing that I want to acknowledge is that it wasn't just a me problem. This is a team problem. So I took the problem and tried to ideate with my team to find solutions. So one thing that I think is kind of fun is the design exercise of how might we's, and taking a statement saying, it feels really forced to have to, figure out how to schedule some kind of time to hang out over a Zoom call so that you can, connect with your teammates. So turning that into an opportunity or a question to say, how might we make it not feel forced? Or how might we actually take advantage of the virtual nature of the work? So what that ultimately turned into was a few different lessons or things that we used as a team to create those types of connections. And first and foremost, I think there is a baseline of just consistent rituals. Like I said, showing up at the stand-up, showing up for your team, those will help just build that baseline. We also have little quirky things that you can do in the remote workspace, like using Slack or using whatever communication tools you're using with fun little emojis. Like, it's very silly, but it's a way to add some colorfulness or some playfulness to say, okay, thumbs up means I've seen this, or thumbs up means I agree with this. Or if I put a thread here, that means I want us to thread our comments. Just having that little shared understanding with your team. Second thing I'll say is that I personally think the camera on is very important. Now, I don't want to say, yes, everyone has to have their cameras on all the time, so I know that can be exhausting. But generally agreeing if you're going to do cameras on or cameras off in certain situations, I think it's very important. It makes it feel a little more connected. You can read people's facial cues in a way that you can't just over voice. I also have found that I haven't found a way around this. I think this is the best way, just scheduling the team bonding, but maybe having some kind of central theme or thing you're doing to make it feel a little less awkward. So whether that's a happy hour where you maybe play a game, or mixing up between coffee hours and happy hours. I've found that happy hours are a little harder for parents to attend, whereas coffee hours are a little more flexible. Another thing we've done that is less open-ended, it's a little more specific, is doing something like a team book club where you're reading articles or a book together and you can come and discuss it. Another fun one that's a little less time intensive is like a UX teardown. So taking a app and downloading it and learning everything about the first time user experience and then documenting it and going over it together as a group. That one's kind of fun. The other thing that I've done is instituted a 2-minute human check-in. So the team and I will share a little bit about what's going on in our personal lives, not purely work in the stand-up. And I don't mean, like your deep dark secrets or like super personal things. Just, did you watch a fun movie? Did you go for a walk? Maybe you're into plants and you have some update about your plants or your cooking, whatever it might be. Just to, we would observe these things about each other or know them by overhearing each other in person. And you just get none of that when you are separate from each other. So I think it's a nice way to kind of share like a non-work activity or story in that embedded daily routine. Okay, third problem. The third problem, this one is very personal, and I felt this very acutely, is there is no separation from work and home when you are working from home in particular. I know that in the past, sometimes work remotely meant not at home. That's not as much the context of today. Most folks are working from home, but there is really not a separation from work and home when you have a remote job. And for me, I just found that when you don't have that physical boundary, it really changes your relationship to work and a lot of things about your life. So I wanted to share a little bit about my own personal experience. And as I mentioned before, I did get the opportunity to work in Hawaii and wanted to share this really beautiful picture because that is what I imagined my life would be like most of the time. I just thought, oh, it's going to be so great. I'll be outdoors more and, so much time for activities. But of course, your schedule looks a lot more like it does normally when you're working in an office, just lots of busy meetings and things going on. And I also found that the time zone difference made me feel constantly behind. So I would wake up and immediately start working because I didn't go anywhere or leave afterwards. My brain had no clear signal that the workday was ending. And I think that I genuinely care about what I do. So it was easy to convince myself that it was good that I would be constantly available or working a lot. And then I noticed that bleed into, okay, I'm going to eat lunch at my computer because I don't have anywhere to go. And then I also found that I worked from my couch a lot, and that was really not good for my back or my, just my personal health. So what I had to do was change my priorities, and I had to prioritize for what was going to be a more sustainable work and life balance. And for me, I think that when I look back, I was treating working remotely like I was working from home, like it was something that was temporary or that I just needed to get through it for a day, not that it was something I had to really put time into thinking about how this was going to change me or how it was going to work for me. And then I think that because I wasn't in an office, I just had this psychological need to prove that I was doing my work by being constantly available. I think that when you show up and you're present and you're there, you're kind of putting in the face time, you're putting in the hours. It feels like, okay, I'm here, I'm doing it. But when you're not there, I was just worried, like, are people going to forget about me? And I feel like I overcompensated by trying to be constantly available. And that had detrimental effects on how I was able to separate my work and home life, and felt at a certain point that I was leading to burnout. So I feel like I had to really shift and trust that my job is about providing value to the customer in margin enhancing ways. And my work is going to show that more than me just being constantly online. And then the other thing is that when I stopped going into an office every day, I feel like I also stopped investing in parts of the normal workday that would make up your experience. So things like a dedicated lunchtime, social time sitting next to your really awesome coworkers, the time commuting, the time walking to conference rooms. Yes, this is all time saved. Like in many ways I hear that, like, oh, it's time saved. But those are also times away from your just work, your just job. So I would find that I just would be exhausted at the end of the day from looking at a screen because I wasn't getting those little breaks. And then it ultimately just occurred to me that I had to use my prioritization skills and change my ultimate goal in order for me to rebalance what my priorities were. And I think that that looks like a more sustainable, enjoyable work life. So what that has been for me is a real lesson in how to respect your own work-life boundaries. And that sounds silly. It's totally true no matter what. Like, even if it's not just a remote work thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It is every person in every career work thing, but felt particularly true when transitioning to working at home. And I think the things that I have used to make this feel more sustainable for me are having a dedicated work setup. As you can see, I'm like in a desk or a space that's separate. That has been really important, both from ergonomics, and I also think it's really important to get your lighting right. That's another thing that I would highly encourage. I know not everyone has the opportunity to do this either with the separating the space. So really whatever you can do to kind of have a cut between your work day and your day when you're done working, I think is really important. The other thing that I have done is just experiment with what it is that's going to work best for me and my schedule. Schedules are a lot different now that you don't have that big commute. So what does that look like for you? For me, there are two things that are super, super important that help me feel more productive and just like a better person. One is taking a lunch break where I actually close my computer and can eat my lunch, whether that's a half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever that is, just taking a break. And then the other part of that, I think, is at the end of the day to kind of signal to me that the day is over, taking a small walk, going on a long walk, going on a run, whatever it is that says, okay, you're taking a split between work and now done with work. I also have instituted the Pomodoro technique, which is a really great Chrome extension. And you just have a 25-minute focus time followed by a 5-minute break, 25-minute focus time, 5-minute break, to make sure it's just my like reminder to schedule those breaks into the day. It also reminds me to stand up, which I find is really important, particularly for my back. And then I think this one has been proven by a lot of research in turning off self-view in your camera. I know that Zoom supports this. I'm not necessarily sure about other software, but being able to not have that constant mirror or feedback of what you look like all the time, that is not a normal thing. That is not happening in your day-to-day work life when you're in a physical office space. So I think it's really important for your own mental health to just turn that off for a while. And the last thing, similarly, is just turning off your computer altogether, really unplugging from work for a while. Just a small amount of time every day, no devices. That has really helped me. I know that that's more of like a life tip than anything else, but I have found that has helped me be a more productive coworker. A lot of my best ideas, my mind just naturally drifts back to work a lot of the time. When I'm working out or something like that, they'll come from when I'm doing non-work activities. So I have noticed that that has also been a helpful thing for me. So 3 takeaways. I'm just going to sum it all up for you, and then I'll be done. So I think that the 3 things that I would like to impart about my experience of working from home or working remotely in general. And what I think could be helpful to you is to redefine how your team collaborates. Focus on showing up, even if it's virtually, which in this case it is, for your team. And then respecting your own work-life boundaries. I think those three things are so important and have helped me a lot in my time as a product manager working remotely. And then last thing, special secret number 4, I have noticed that my skills that I've acquired being a product manager, defining problems, ideating on solutions, and prioritizing what's going to work best based on my goals they're just great skills. And they've helped me along the way as I navigate some of my own problems. They've helped me in this case, and I tried to highlight how that has helped me. So I want to say a big thank you to you for showing up and wanting to learn about this. If you have questions or want to share your own story, feedback about what I can do better, I have a link in here, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think that's all I've got. So thank you so much, and I will catch you soon.